Hello everyone. This talk relates to Transfer of Property Act 1882. And coming to the introduction of this act, the Transfer of Property Act came into force on the first day of July 1882. Before passing this act, there was no uniformity and certainty to the law relating to transfer of property. So Indian courts used to apply the English law to the disputes arising in the presidency towns, namely Madras, Bombay and Calcutta. It is very difficult for Indian courts to apply the English law that suited to Indian conditions. So in Mofussil, the disputes relating to law of property used to be decided on the principles of justice equity, because there were no rules provided in any statute. So to remedy this dichotomy and to bring uniformity and certainty, codification of law has resorted to be appointing several law commissions for this purpose. And the third law commission has prepared a draft bill on the law of property in the year 1870. The draft bill was revised by the fourth law commission and it was enacted as a Transfer of Property Act 1882. So this is the brief introduction of Transfer of Property Act 1882. So coming to the object of this act, in a civilized society, transfer of property from one person to another person is quite obvious. There are different laws or there are different legislations governing the transfer of property. That means movable or immovable under different circumstances. So those circumstances are, the first one is when a movable property is transferred from one living person to another living person, the law applied is the Sale of Goods Act 1930. And the second one is when the property is transferred from dead person to living person, the law applied is law of succession. In law of succession, and there are two categories, testamentary succession and intestate succession. And the third circumstance is when an immobile property is transferred from one living person to another living person, the law applied is Transfer of Property Act 1882. So the Transfer of Property Act may be explained under the following categories: transfer of movable and immobile property, and the second one is transfer between intervivors, that means between two living persons, and the third one is voluntary transfers and involuntary transfers. So the Transfer of Property Act 1882 contains 137 sections covering both general principles and specific transfers. So the act has been divided into two parts. The first part contains section 1 to 53A. This part deals with the general principles, while part 2 contains section 54 to 137, and this part contains various provisions relating to the specific transfers. So we already discussed about the Transfer of Property Act mainly deals with the transfer of immobile property, and some provisions deals with the transfer of movable property also between two living persons. So this act does not apply to transfers by operation of law. By operation of law means, example, succession, court of sales, insolvency, etc. And the main point, it is significant to note that the act, it is not in nowhere it is defined that what is transfer of property. It merely defines the word transfer under section 5. Coming to the scope of the act, the scope of the act is limited because it does not apply to all transfers which takes place in India. And the Transfer of Property Act is subject to certain territorial and other limitations. So we can discuss the other limitations. The first one is the Transfer of Property Act applies to transfer by act of parties only. It does not regulate a transfer by operation of law. By operation of law means transfer which is necessitated by the order of court of law. For example, insolvency, court sale or auction, forfeiture, etc. Its operation is therefore limited to transfer by act of parties only, except in a few cases saved by section 2 of the act. And coming to the second limitation, the act deals with a transfer of property inter vivos. That means a transfer between two living persons. Thus, a transmission of property which takes place under a will or through succession is not covered by this act. This was held in Kishori versus Krishna Kamini. Krishna Kamini's case, 37 Calcutta 377. The citation is. And the third one is, although the Transfer of Property Act 1882 contains provisions for the transfer of immobile properties, that means section 5 to section 37 deals with the transfer of mobile properties, and major portion of the enactment is applicable to the transfer of immobile property only. So that means the majority of the provisions in the Transfer of Property Act mainly deals with the transfer of immobile property only. And coming to the fourth limitation, section 2 of this act saves the rules of Mohammedan law insofar they are inconsistent with any of the provisions contained in chapter 2. The result is therefore that chapter 2 of the Transfer of Property Act does not affect the transfer by Mohammedans even if it is against any of the provisions of chapter 2. Again, section 129 of the act expressly says that nothing contained in chapter 7 of the enactment, it relates to gifts, shall be deemed to affect any rule of Mohammedan law. And the fifth limitation is territorial limitations. So finally we can say that the act is not exhaustive. Although the act covers a large area of the law of transfer of immobile property, it does not profess to be a complete code. So it was intended to define and amend the existing law and not to introduce any new principles. So the provisions of the act are not applicable to a case. So suppose, for example, when the provisions of the act are not applicable to a case, the courts are entitled to apply the rules of English law at the time matter, not inconsistency with the act on the basis of the rules of justice, equity. And the Transfer of Property Act 1882 has amended, repealed in part from time to time, namely the Amendment of 1929 or the Transfer of Property Amendment Act 1929, which came into force on 1st April 1930, and the Amendment Act of 1929 amended more than 50 sections and introduced some new sections. So in this slide we can see the changes brought about by the Act 1929. The Transfer of Property Amendment Act 1929, which came into force from 1st April 1930, the Act introduced certain drastic changes or extensive amendments in the Act. So we can see some of the changes. The first one is registration of a compulsorily registrable document operates as a constructive notice. The effect of the provision is to supersede the Privy Council decision in Tilak Dharilal's case, and the citation of this case is 48 Cal 1 Privy Council. And the second change is transfer in favor of a class is not to be wholly void, though some members of the class are unable to take. By this rule, in Leake versus Robinson case, it has been mentioned, and the decision of the Privy Council in Sundararajan versus Natarajan case, 48 Madras 906 Privy Council superseded. This is the second change. And the third one is the doctrine of part performance has been statutorily recognized and embodied in section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act. The result of this, to render obsolete such rulings of the Privy Council as Arif versus Adunath case. The citation of this case is 58 Cal 1235 Privy Council. And the fourth change brought by the Act 1929 is A mortgage is usufructuary if the mortgagor binds himself to deliver possession, though possession is not actually delivered. Thus, provision statutorily overrules the view to the contrary taken by a full bench of the Madras High Court in one case, and the name of the case is Subhama versus Naraya. And the fifth one is, the mortgage has to bring a single suit in consolidation of all the mortgages held by him, in respect of which the mortgage money has become due and in respect of which he has the right to obtain the same kind of decree. So this provision supersedes such decisions as Subramanya versus Siva Subramanya and Sundar Singh versus Valu's case. And the sixth one is the remedy of foreclosure, which according to the decision of the Privy Council in Vasudeva Modaliyar versus Srinivasa, the decision it is available to the English mortgage has been taken away from him. This remedy is restricted to a mortgagee by a conditional sale and a mortgagee under an anomalous mortgage by the terms of which he is entitled to foreclosure. So this is the sixth change. And the seventh one is the doctrine of subrogation. The doctrine of subrogation has been crystallized in section 92. So the important change introduced by the amendment is that a conventional subrogation can be recognized only if it is evidenced by a registered instrument. So in this slide, we can discuss the scheme of the Transfer of Property Act 1882. So here we can see that how the property can be transferred. So the transfer of property may be of by act of parties. So if it is happened by act of parties, we can say that it is a voluntary transfer. And sometimes transfer may be of by operation of law. That means we can call it as compulsory transfers. For example, succession, insolvency, execution, etc. So voluntary transfers may be of two kinds. That is testamentary. So testamentary means this kind of transfers may be of governed by the Indian Succession Act. And the second one is transfer between intervivors. So intervivors means transfer of property between two living persons, and this is governed by the Transfer of Property Act. Again, transfer between two living persons can be classified as two types. That is transfer of property. So the transfer of property may be of mobile or immobile. Section 5 to 37 and 122 to 137 deals with the transfer of mobile or immobile property. And section 25 to 53A and 54 to 137 sections deals with that. They specifically deals with the transfer of immobile property. Again, the transfer of immobile property is classified as the transfers may be of the transfer of immobile property may be of in the form of sale or in the form of mortgages, lease, exchange, gift, etc. So this is the scheme of the Transfer of Property Act 1882. And in this slide, some definitions are explained under interpretation clause section 3. Those definitions are immobile property, attestation, actionable claim, and notice. First, we see the definition of immobile property. Generally, property may be of two kinds. Maybe of it may be mobile property or immobile property. So we can define mobile property generally, which can be transferred from one place to another place with human efforts. That kind of property can be called as mobile property. And coming to the immobile property is one which cannot be transferred from one place to another without causing damage to such property. So Transfer of Property Act deals with the transfer of both movable and immobile property, but most of the provisions relate to immobile property only. So therefore it is necessary to discuss in detail what is the definition of immobile property. So section 3 deals with the section 3 para 2 of the Transfer of Property Act defines immobile property. According to that, immobile property does not include standing timber, growing crops or grass. So this is the definition which is mentioned in section 3 and in section 3. So the expression standing timber means trees fit for use for building or repairing houses. Growing crops includes all vegetable growths which have no existence apart from their produce, such as palm leaves, sugarcane, etc. Similarly, grass only be used as fodder and it is a mobile property. So we can say that the above definition as negatively defined under the TP Act, excluding the above 3 items, it is not a comprehensive definition. So it merely excludes standing timber, growing crops and grass. It only says that these 3 things, namely standing timber, growing crops and grass, are not immobile properties. That is the definition which is given under section 3 of the Transfer of Property Act. And according to the General Clauses Act 1897, section 3K 26 of the General Clauses Act 1897 defines immobile property. So according to that, immobile property shall include land, benefits arising out of land and things attached to earth, are permanently fastened to anything attached to the earth. So according to this definition, only to physical objects and does not furnish an exhaustive test of what is and what is not immobile property. So the term immobile property includes 3 things, namely land, benefits arising out of land and things attached to the earth. So we can summarize this as according to the Transfer of Property Act, immobile property does not include standing timber, growing crops and grass. According to General Clauses Act, immobile property includes land, benefits arising out of land and things attached to the earth. So these are the definitions of immobile property. And according to the Indian Registration Act 1908, section 2(6) of the Act defines immobile property as immobile property includes land, buildings, hereditary allowances, right of ways, lights, ferries, fisheries or any other benefits arising out of land and things attached to the earth, but not standing timber, growing crops or grass. Of course, this definition is a better one since it has covered many items, and this definition also excludes standing timber, growing crops and grass. If the above 3 definitions are viewed together, it is very clear to us that they do not tell what is immobile property. So they only tell us what is either included or not included therein. In all the above 3 definitions, the last 3 things, those are standing timber, growing crops and grass, are excluded from the definition since they are not severable from the land. So the correct idea of immobile property is the negative definition of the TP Act and the positive definition of the General Clauses Act as stated above, or if taken together, we succeed in giving correct idea of immobile property. So by this we can say that immobile property means land, benefits to arise out of land and things attached to earth are permanently fastened to anything attached to earth. So it is clear from the above that the term immobile property includes 3 things, namely land, benefits to land and things attached to earth. It excludes 3 things, namely standing timber, growing crops and grass. And the second definition, attestation, means to sign and witness the fact of execution of a document by the executant. So attested in relation to an instrument means, and it shall be deemed always to have meant attested by two or more witnesses, each of whom has seen the executant sign or affix his mark to the instrument. So the essentials or the requisites for attestation are: the first one is definition under the section is confined to only non-testamentary instrument. It will not apply to wills, etc. And the second essential is minimum 2 attesting witnesses are needed, maximum is not mentioned. And the third one is 3 modes of attestation are recognized. For example, the first one is each sees the executant signing or fixing mark, or each sees some other person signing in the presence and by the direction of the executant, or each has received from the executant the personal acknowledgement of executant sign, of executant mark, sign of one who signed the executant in his presence and by his direction. And the fourth one is each witness signs the instrument in presence of executant. And the fifth essential is presence of both or all attesting witnesses one and at the same time is not essential. And the sixth one is no particular form of attestation is prescribed. And the qualification of attester is he must be a major and a person of sound mind, and he may be literate or illiterate. So these are the essentials for attestation. And coming to the next definition, actionable claims. This also under section 3. This definition also defined under section 3. And actionable claim is an act or claim for which an action can be instituted in civil court for realization of the benefit. So it means any unsecured debt or any interest in movable property not in possession of the claim. So an actionable claim is a claim to take a legal action for the realization of the benefit. For this, the essential elements are: there must be an unsecured debt. Unsecured debt means the claim under actionable claim may be an unsecured debt. That means unsecured debt means a debt without security. So debts secured by a mortgage of immovable property or by a pledge of movable property are not actionable claims. For example, X owes 5,000 rupees to Y against a promissory note. Y claim is actionable claim. And the second essential is beneficial interest in movable property. A right to claim benefit in a contract of purchase of goods is a beneficial interest in movable property. For example, A agrees to sell 100 bags of wheat to be delivered on a future date, and B has a beneficial interest and it is an actionable claim. So these are the essentials for actionable claim. And the fourth one is notice. Notice literally means knowledge as to existence of certain facts. So according to section 3 of the Transfer of Property Act, notice means the last paragraph of section 3 defines that under what circumstances a person is said to have notice of a fact or going to have the knowledge of the same. So it runs as follows: a person is said to have notice of a fact when he actually knows of that fact, or when, but for willful abstention from an inquiry or such which he ought to have made, or gross negligence, he would have known it. So this is the definition of notice. So notice may be of actual or express notice, or constructive or implied notice, or notice to agent, or imputed notice. So this is the information regarding notice.